Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by three Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for coffee and conversation.
Well, welcome everybody. Teresa and Danielle and I are happy you're with us. And we have a topic today that is actually going to be a series. We have been very compelled. We've been talking a lot about resilience and all what we need to get through this very, very trying time. But we want to go deeper with this whole idea of what it takes to take life's curveballs, the COVIDs, and to even get into the point where you can take even the more serious ones. So this series, we're going to call it Grit, the Power of a Compelling Why. And it'll be 3 episodes. This is the first, and we're going to talk a lot about grit and the traits of resilience and the traits of people who successfully navigate through difficult times. And the second episode will be all about post-traumatic growth. And Teresa has had so much experience with that in some of the work that she does with widows. And then lastly, we'll have a story. We'll call it Molly's story because Molly is someone that we have become acquainted with, and her story is so inspiring, compelling, and I think has a lesson for all of us. So let's get into it. And we certainly know that COVID has required all of us to make adjustments in our lives, has knocked us out of our rituals and those things we like to do and are used to doing. And I think some of the mindlessness of our lives, because I think all of us have, Danielle, I'm sure you have something to say about that, have become more mindful just because our lives are so different. I think in time we would probably get into a habit and ritual where we would be a little more mindless again. But right now, I think we're all doing that. But it has required us to be resilient, to get through this, because we all have suffered losses, not only people potentially, which is very serious, but a loss of our identity as it's defined by what we do and how we spend our time. Yeah. And that can be very difficult, and not everyone has done well. So I thought maybe, what do you think, guys, that maybe we should, we had an episode where we went through 9 questions to evaluate your resilience from Dr. Siebert's book. So maybe we can drill just a little deeper on that. And why don't we go over the traits of resilient people? We've done the research. We have 7 traits that are very frequently or almost always saw in resilient people, and maybe just chat a little bit about those things and then move on from there. What do you think?
Sounds good.
Well, the first one I think you all know is mindfulness, and so I am going to punt that immediately to who, and those of you who listen to us all the time. We all appreciate the absolute center role of mindfulness in our lives and a healthy longevity, but someone digs deeper than the rest of us. So Danielle, you have the floor.
I kind of feel like I've been typecast a little bit, but that's okay. It's funny. As I moved from, and I've taught meditation for a long time, and this last year I've been doing a lot of coaching, which I thought was going to be completely different. And yet in every one of my sessions, it always comes up about being mindful. And in some cases where we allow time to do some kind of mindfulness activity or meditation, because you have to be there's with everything that's going on, on a non-COVID time in our lives, things are crazy. You still got your kids, and some people are caregivers, and you're working. And to have to re-navigate, you need to really define what's important, what do I need to get rid of, and really focus. So to me, mindfulness is what allows you to just take that pause, kind of step outside the situation, and then come back to it with a greater clarity. So I can absolutely see how that would help you emotionally, but also just navigate.
Well, and to deal with stress, right? I mean, what do we normally do? I use the word catastrophize. I mean, we do a lot of that with our monkey minds, our chattering minds. And with what's going on now, if you go to dark places in your mind, as we frequently do, I mean, who can handle that, day in and day out? So mindfulness, it really helps us deal with stress. Yeah. So what's mindfulness? I think it's just being where you are, in your mind, having your mind where you are. During this COVID thing, I used to draw, but, I was busy life. You don't have time and all that. So I started drawing again, and it's such a vivid example of what mindfulness is. I mean, it doesn't have to be something like an art or even a skill. You can focus on the noises around you, on your breath, on anything. But drawing, it is the most pleasurable thing, and time just flies, and I'm not catastrophizing, and I'm very positive, and then I look at what I've drawn, and that puts me in a nice place. So, well, mindfulness. Well, the next one, I know Teresa must have some words on this, is about a positive outlook. Because, God, if you ever needed one, or if there was ever a challenge to have one, it's now.
Yeah, and our brains are hardwired for a negativity bias, right? Because spotting danger was a good thing, and the people who could spot danger lived to reproduce. And I guess we're kind of a product of those people. So of course we have a negativity bias, and then we have the news, which offers us, even more of a negativity bias. And that's fine. We can thank our brains for always looking for what's potentially bad in order to keep us alive. But we can also change the channel and be intentional about asking ourselves what's right, what's good, right? And so I would just say, understand that your brain is designed to spot what's potentially dangerous and negative, but also intentionally change that channel. It's such a good exercise.
Yeah, I read a great story in Sapolsky's book on why don't zebras have ulcers. It was about stress, and we're hardwired. So think of our hunter-gatherer ancestors. They're walking along, and they see something brown in the grass. So, the one person says, "Oh, that's a rock. I'm going to go over and sit on that rock. Oh, it's wonderful. It's a pretty rock." But it could be a lion, but I'm sure it's a rock. And so you go, and that person doesn't survive. Their genes don't keep being passed on. The one who says, "That could be a lion. I'm not going there. It's probably a lion. I know it's a lion." And so there's that negativity bias. For me, it made it a good picture of exactly what that means. I think we all agree, right? Danielle, you even can be negative sometimes, right? In your mind, even though you never show it.
Always. And I have to share something funny, because this was so helpful to me as a tip, because sometimes we don't know, when you have that negativity saying, "I can't handle this, I can't do this." I have a colleague who said to me once, she gives that negative person in her brain a name, whatever the name is, Harry or Bob. "Go away, Bob. I hear you. I see you. I don't need that right now." And by giving it a name, she actually disconnects from that negative thought and then returns to a positive. I'm like, that's rather brilliant. So
yeah, and I've heard Teresa say that on a previous podcast, where when you get these dark thoughts, you recognize them, because stepping out and observing them and treating like another entity, it doesn't become you. I mean, we tend to identify with our thoughts, that we are our thoughts, but when we can step away and identify a negative thought, that gives us power over that, because we don't have to become it, and we can make decisions. It's like emotions too. They're a little more difficult to step away from, but when you can do that, then they don't overwhelm you. So, no question. The next one is flexibility. You've met these rigid people, and what do they say about rigid things? They break. And boy, that is forever true. And so something like this, someone who absolutely must do their schedule, must have certain things, their day has to be structured in a certain way. And I'm not saying OCD people as much as just some people, that's how they structure their lives. Let's face it, they've been thrown for a loop. and some can't handle that. And therefore they don't do well. Those who say, "Okay, Eckhart Tolle says, when you get a stressful situation, and change is stressful for people, most of us, we inherited that from our ancestors also. That's why the amygdala fires and all that. He says there's only a couple of things to do. You either fix it or make a plan to fix it so that you're actually doing something, or you walk away from it. It's not your problem. Why should I be worried about what's happening in Syria? I mean, I'm not saying to be, immune to tragedy. And but if there's nothing you can do, don't carry it around on you as a backpack with you, especially when you've got other things to deal with, or accept it. And there's the big flexibility part. Because, you get a flat tire. You can start, why me? Why me? Why today? Those are bad tires. Who sold me those tires? You can do all of that. Or you can say, I got a flat. I'm going to change it. I'm going to call, road service. I'll cancel the appointment I was going to. That's all I can do. That also is flexibility. So any words? Yeah.
Yeah. Acceptance doesn't mean we like it. And it doesn't mean we would invite it or even condone it, depending on what it is. But acceptance just means it happened. Done. Right. I'm not going to spend my energy arguing with that reality. The fact that it happened, I'm going to redirect my energy. That's all it means. And we struggle with that because we think it means something more than it actually does.
Like surrender. We think it's surrender. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I was going to add in my training in emotional intelligence, flexibility is one of the key components to stress management. And and I happen to be one of those inflexible people who follow a schedule, Roger. I could feel you looking at me as you were making that.
No.
It's true. And one of the things I had to learn early on with COVID is, give up the plan. Give up the plan and just be willing, as Teresa often says, willing to be uncomfortable and know I am still safe. It is not my, according to my plan, but I'm still safe. And it's really important it's amazing how much you de-stress when you learn to just kind of ride the wave with what's happening around you.
Oh my God, life becomes so much easier for you. I mean, again, it's not that you're surrendering, you're just accepting reality. What person would say you're crazy to accept reality? that doesn't make sense when you see it that way. No, and a friend of mine once said, whatever happens to you, respond to it as if you chose it. Like it was your decision to make that happen. And, rather than, rail to the gods about all that. All right, Danielle, you ready?
Uh-oh.
You're going to love this one. Concern for others, compassion.
Oh, yes. So, compassion is a fascinating topic for me because when you study positive psychology, people confuse compassion and sympathy. When you sympathize, you can really feel it and get involved. And so a lot of times people want to, again, that fear response, we want to back away from that discomfort. I can't be around it. Whereas compassion embraces that discomfort. It's like, I'm willing to be there present for you. And when that happens, you forget about, not only do you forget your own troubles, but even in the face of adversity, you recognize it's not just me. Teresa's also going through this pandemic. Roger's also going through it. This connects us because we are sharing this experience, and it kind of takes you out of your own and puts you in the mind of, the people around you. So compassion to me, and compassion really builds resilience.
What did Dalai Lama say? If you want others to be happy, have compassion. If you want to be happy, have compassion. About sums it up, doesn't it? Well, it'd be a better world, wouldn't it? Kindness, compassion, empathy. We need a lot. Teresa, how about a sense of humor? That's a trait we see in resilient people.
We do indeed. We do indeed. That willingness to laugh at ourselves, right? The willingness to laugh at even the more difficult or annoying things that life serves up, and the willingness to laugh with other people. There's really lots of reasons to laugh, isn't there?
Yeah. There are times, of course, where it's tough, but as physician, and you saw it when you worked in hospitals, there's some things that are very, very difficult to process. And, we in medicine call it gallows humor or dark humor.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that everyone should hear, because I think they would think you were callous.
Yeah.
But it's a tool we use just to get through the horrible things. Now, for most of us, these things aren't horrible with COVID. Certainly what's happening in the world and in our country is horrible, but it's not right in our face. Although some people are facing some pretty horrible things. But, just the ability to laugh. I mean, what that does physiologically and everything, it's
amazing. And even manufactured laughter, so to speak, laughter yoga, it has benefits, and you're not actually laughing at anything, specific, right?
Danielle, have you ever done laughter yoga or
Laughter yoga? No, I actually have two comments though. When you mentioned laughing on purpose, I was actually, for part of our program, my masterpiece, I found a social experiment on laughter where this man walks into a bus and he's looking down at his phone and he just starts laughing and laughing and laughing and laughing. And within 2 minutes, everybody's laughing. They're not laughing at anything in particular. And they feel good, and everybody has this shared experience, and they didn't even have to laugh about anything in particular.
Yeah.
It's a definite social connector.
Yeah.
It connects us as humans, as a species, and even a hyena can make us feel good, because they can duplicate laughter. But no, that's so important. Yes.
And I'm glad you mentioned that gallows humor. There's a podcast, Humorology podcast, and he talks about that. And he said, that's a necessary survival technique for anybody who's on the front lines to get through that, to have that kind of gallows humor. And it's important. I'm glad you mentioned it, because sometimes people who are on the outside don't get it, and they think people are lacking sympathy, when in reality, that's what they need to do to not break down in that moment.
Yeah, it has to be in a back room. You can't do it out in the front, like in ERs and things. I mean, because then it shouldn't be there, because people are suffering. But the staff is also suffering and has to get through this. Teresa, do you have something you wanted to add?
It's maybe a form of compartmentalizing, right? The gallows humor.
It is. That's very, very true. I found it in pilots. They could be going through some horrific family things, and we used to talk to them, because I had to decide whether they were fit to fly. And they have tremendous ability. Physicians and other certain professions like EMTs and that sort of thing, have the ability to compartmentalize, because it's an absolute necessity. There's one that just talks about healthy lifestyle. And, part of the book, Live Long, Die Short, was about the 10 tips to a healthy longevity, but it's also those things, being holistically healthy, physical, mental, social, spiritual in particular in these cases. We see better immune systems, and we see less chronic disease, less dementia, less heart disease, less cancer. And it goes through a number of different ways. Ellen Langer's, talks a lot about this, but we sort of, it's like training camp. It's like boot camp. This is what we do, not for any particular episode that's coming, just knowing that life's going to throw us a curveball. So the stronger we are physically, emotionally for sure, and mentally connected with a support group, and spiritually, having purpose. And that all allows us to say, I want to get through this. I think we'll hear that from probably from Molly's story, and I'm sure from some of the stories you have, that there was a why I wanted to get through this. That's the title of this whole series, part of the title. So investing in those things is going to help you with resilience. All right. So we're down to the last one, and let's all grab it. But Teresa, why don't you go first with purpose?
Purpose. Yeah. When we have a catastrophic life event, we often wonder what our purpose is now. And even when we even have a pandemic and it's gone on and on and on, we might also wonder what our purpose is now. And it's easy to wander around and not have a purpose. And that's problematic for us. It's so worth it for us to consider what our purpose is. And Dr. Roger, I've heard you say so many times, if you have a pulse, you have a purpose. And I think that is so powerful. And I think it's true.
Danielle?
Yeah, and I will definitely in the description of this podcast refer back to some of the earlier episodes we've done with Sarah Menser, where we talk in greater detail about finding your purpose. One of the things that I think is a beautiful thing to come out of the pandemic, and Teresa's going to talk about grit in a little bit, about finding, and part of that is finding value in the negative and turning it into something that you can use. And I feel like with regards to purpose, many people have quickly discovered what wasn't their purpose, and they cut a lot of things out of their life because now time has become precious. They have so little of it if they're trying to manage all these different things during a pandemic. So I realize that people being out of work, some people have more time, but by and large, people are valuing the time that they have more. So some part of finding the purpose is realizing what's not working and kind of cutting the slack and really honing in. And I've talked to a lot of people who are changing careers and realizing, hey, I've been living out of alignment with my purpose this whole time, and it took a pandemic to show it to me.
So, Teresa, you told us about a book you read called Grit, and, that's part of the title of this whole series. Can you?
So good. Angela Duckworth. Angela Duckworth is the author. It's called Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. It's such a good book. You guys would really enjoy. I enjoyed every page of it. And she talks about grit being basically an unwillingness to quit, like a stick with itness, if that were a word. And as the title says, it's not only about being passionate about something, but being willing to persevere, like to be willing to fail your way there. And as you said, Roger, it takes a compelling why. It's not only having determination, but it's about having direction too. And I think so often we tend to lose, we may lose our why over time. And especially over a very long time of being shut in a pandemic. So passion plus perseverance, or put differently, determination plus direction. So good. And that, when we've talked about in the podcast before, that being unafraid of failing. So what? If you have a compelling why, you're just going to fail your way there.
Oh,
okay.
I love that. Fail your way to it. No, I think that allows all of us to get rid of the pressure we got in junior high, or from our parents or from even our careers. It cannot fail. It absolutely cannot fail. Well, you know what? You don't grow unless you fail a little bit. But tack on to that something that you didn't necessarily fail at, but that really knocked you off your heels and knocked you back on your heels or off your feet altogether. So once more, I think you pull the covers over your head or do you? Yeah, and that's okay for a while. Sometimes things will knock you for a loop. But eventually you throw those covers off and you get out and you go do it. Gritty.
Grit. So good.
So how do you develop grit?
How do you develop? Well, it's such a good question, Danielle. And I think to Roger's point earlier, do you have a compelling why? That's probably step one. And the word compelling is such an important word. Like it's gotta win the argument. It's gotta be compelling enough to win the argument of, let's just stay in bed and Netflix and eat sugar all day, and your compelling why has to win that argument and say, no, there's something better for you. So it has to be compelling.
I think all the traits that we talked about, purpose is the compelling why. The traits that we just talked about for resilience in general, I think are tweaked or magnified or emphasized, I think, with grit. That's how I see it.
It's so true. And then, we're so sort of swept up in the latest shiny object. And so grit is also about constraint. And Danielle, you alluded to constraint earlier, but it's about persevering toward that thing that you're passionate about and toward that compelling why. So stick with itness. That's grit.
Yeah, and it's interesting that this is coming up now. Most of the time when I'm coaching people, and there's a lot of people reaching out to Teresa and myself because of what's happening in the pandemic. And And I'll ask someone, okay, this is what you're going to present to me. I'm holding you accountable for whatever it is that they want to accomplish by this time next week. And I'll ask, what can I say to you to keep you on track if you don't do what you've just said you're going to do? And they always say, just remind me why I'm doing this. Remind me of my vision. And we spend a lot of time figuring out what the vision is, because you can't really have grit unless you know what you want and why you want it.
Drum roll again, the compelling why. There you go. Well, you can simplify it too. We talked about grit being passion and perseverance, but let's simplify it. What gets you out of bed in the morning, on a regular day? Why? There were tasks to do, but there's more than that. And certainly during COVID, I think it requires more. And then what's coming next in the next episode, where we begin to talk about catastrophic change and loss in your life. That's a whole nother dimension to this whole thing, but we can learn from it. Teresa, you want to tell us what the next episode's going to be about?
Yeah, it's about post-traumatic growth. We hear so much about post-traumatic stress, but we don't hear much about post-traumatic growth. And it has been researched well for decades, actually, and we just don't hear much about it. So we're going to be talking about post-traumatic growth, which is what can happen after a seismic event that levels everything that was once familiar and safe about your life, and what can happen after such an event. So we're looking forward to diving in next time.
Join us. You'll be better for it. Thanks, guys.
You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.